Trustee Guyer.
Here.
Trustee Spurling.
Here.
Trustee Lee.
Here.
Trustee Youngerman.
Here.
Trustee Marisak.
Here.
And Trustee Betzinger.
Here. All right, do have a quorum this evening. I should state that we are handling this meeting per the governor's executive order via Zoom and in person. We do have a number of people here in the audience today, but we also have board members and applicants and the press participating remotely via Zoom. So as per that order, residents have had 2 or 3 different opportunities to submit for public comment this evening. One is to show up in person. If they're not comfortable doing that, either emailing or calling Jeff ahead of time or joining the Zoom, I suppose. But is there any member of the public that has done that?
We've not received any public comment.
Okay, and is there anybody here that is wishing to make public comment that's not otherwise on the agenda? All right, anybody on Zoom that would like to make public comment? All right, hearing none, I'll go ahead and move on to item B, is the bid opening for 310 North River Street. Administrator Zolfel, go ahead.
Thank you. As required, we published for 3 weeks, taking bids for the property at 310 North River Street. We received 1 bid, which we will open now. Should have brought a water opener. Make it easier. Thank you. The bid is from Edward Schleining in the amount of $5,000 on behalf of the Works Kitchen Sausage Company. Staff will make copies of the attached information provided to all the trustees tomorrow, and then we would bring this back to a future meeting for your consideration of acceptance.
Okay, any questions from the board on that?
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. All right, I would like to pull item H from the consent. It's the Indigenous Peoples' Day Proclamation. I'd like to read that and entertain a motion for approval. So here we have a proclamation celebrating Indigenous Peoples' Day. Whereas Indigenous Peoples' Day was first proposed in 1977 by a delegation of Native nations to the International Conference on Discrimination Against Indigenous Populations in the Americas. And whereas the United States endorsed the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People in December 16th, 2010. And whereas a growing number of cities, towns in the United States have recognized the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples' Day to celebrate Indigenous heritage and resiliency. And whereas the Village of Montgomery recognizes the historical, cultural, and contemporary significance of Indigenous people of the lands that also became known as the Americas. And whereas the Village of Montgomery recognizes it was founded and built upon lands first inhabited by Indigenous peoples of this region and acknowledges and honors these members of the community. And whereas the Village of Montgomery values the many contributions made to our community through Indigenous people's knowledge, labor, technology, science, philosophy, arts, and the deep cultural contribution that has shaped the character of this community. Now therefore, I, Matt Brawley, Village President of Montgomery, do hereby proclaim the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples in Montgomery, Illinois.
Second.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Betzinger. Yes. Trustee Guyer.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
And Trustee Youngerman.
Excellent, thank you. And I should mention that the third grade students at McDowell have wrote me letters last year, but it was right after the date. And so they reached out and kind of, it was like a persuasive article or letter that they wrote. So I do appreciate them kind of getting involved in preserving our history. So I'll be reaching out to that teacher after this as well. So thank you for indulging in that. All right, moving on, I'll read the items on the consent agenda and entertain a motion for approval. We have minutes of the village board meeting from September 28th, accounts payable through October 8th, the building report for September of 2020, accounts receivable report for September of 2020, water production report for September of 2020, refuse and recycling report for August of 2020, Cancellation of the October Committee of the Whole meeting. And then item I is ordinance 1891, authorizing and supporting the continued rebate of residential property taxes. And when this is second reading, we discussed it at the last meeting.
So moved.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Betzinger.
Yes.
Trustee Guyer.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
yes,
And Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Carries 6-0. Thank you. All right, under items for separate action this evening, we have several from Plan Commission that I believe Director Young will be summarizing. But let's go over the first two, discuss those, and we'll vote independently. But we have the recommendation of Plan Commission on PC 2020-008. It's a special use for outdoor storage accessory to the principal use with alternative surfaces for Central States bus sales. And then the enacting ordinance is first reading, 1893, granting that special use. Director Young.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, tonight you have a recommendation from the Plan Commission to approve a special use for outside storage for Central Bus sales. They'd like to locate their operation on the north side of Baseline Road on a 15.5 acre site. There would be a new building constructed for offices and maintenance purposes. And then they've requested for alternative surface for their parking area for the buses themselves. An alternative surface to be approved by the village engineer for the back portion of this property. There is an existing house on the site that would remain as a residential use. And the property is zoned for, the property is zoned for industrial M2 use. So staff and the Plan Commission have recommended approval of this special use request with the alternative surface component.
Thank you. Questions?
I don't have a question, I have a comment. Wanted to commend the Plan Commission for their and staff for the thorough review of this special use. You sat in on the Plan Commission meeting last week or the week before, and Commissioners Bond and Yan and Chairman Hammond and the entire crew asked really great questions, from vehicle maintenance to how long buses would be on the property if they weren't in working order, and just were really thoughtful and thorough. I don't know that commission and always gets enough credit for the work they do in vetting these proposals before they come to the board.
Absolutely. They do much more of the heavy lifting on these issues, honestly, with question and answers than we certainly dive into.
Mr. President, I misspoke and said it was M2, it's actually M1, light industrial. And one of the things that I failed to mention was that the Plan Commission recommended increased amount of landscaping material be provided along the west border of this property that abuts up to a residential subdivision that's unincorporated.
Okay. One thing I'm looking at on the site plan here, up front on the western portion, it says stockpile area. Is that during construction, or is that an actual?
It's not a permanent
Okay.
feature, no.
So it's just like topsoil stockpile during construction?
Correct.
And I saw in there that there was consideration for controlling the dust from this
Yes,
alternate.
we've done this before. You might recall that with the Michaels operation on Orchard Road, there is a bond requirement for dust control material that, if need be, the village could implement with a service to spray the site. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but there is that backup maintenance component.
And we haven't had any issues with the Michaels property.
We have not,
Correct? So it's, the process is working.
yes, sir.
And there's an existing fence between this property and Route 30?
Yes. There is a fence that completely surrounds this property, a wood fence.
All right. And I think it goes without saying, but the residential property that's on site, is the owner and/or tenant of that okay with this?
I don't know who actually resides in the house itself now. I don't know if it's even occupied. But the bus service would be acquiring that property, so
Okay.
they would have the right to lease it to someone
Yeah.
else.
Okay. That works.
And we haven't heard from anybody, any of the residents that are adjacent to this property?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
All right.
Would you like a motion to accept the recommendation of the planning commission?
I'd love one.
So moved?
Second.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Betzinger. Trustee Guyer.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling. Trustee Spurling.
Are you calling me?
Yes, please. Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Thank you.
I can't hear her. Yes.
Okay. Trustee Lee.
I can't hear either. Yes.
Trustee Youngerman.
I can hear you, yes.
All right, I carry 6-0. Teresa, can you hear me okay?
No.
Her volume is very low, Matt.
Okay. All right. We'll work on that. All right, I'll move on to ordinance 1893, which is granting the special use. It is first reading. Is there any objection to putting that on consent for our next meeting? All right, thank you. All right, item C for separate action this evening is a recommendation of the Plan Commission on PC 2020-009, final plat for Unit 3 of the Belmare Subdivision. This is Ryan Holmes. Additionally, item D is ordinance 1894, approving the final plat for Belmare. And we are going to vote on that waiver of first passage on the second. Director Young?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, this is for Unit 3 of the Belmare subdivision. This is the section that will include or complete the townhome. There are 60 townhome lots. Only 8 had been completed prior to the acquisition by a new group to come in and finish out the townhome portion of the Belmare subdivision. So this involves 52 new townhome units in the subdivision. This is the final plat. Basically, it is the same footprint of the original footprint for the buildings that could still be constructed, and it is the same number of units that was approved as part of the original plat of subdivision. So both the Plan Commission and staff have recommended approval.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? All right, is there a motion on item C, recommendation of the Plan Commission of PC 2020-009?
So moved. Second.
Call the roll.
Trustee Guyer.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
And Trustee Betzinger.
Sorry. Rolling into the ordinance 1894, approving the final plat for Belmare Townhomes, waiver of first passage on the second. If there are no other comments, is there a motion for approval?
So moved?
Second.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Betzinger.
Yes.
Trustee Guyer.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
And Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
That carries 6-0. Thank you. Rolling into item E for separate action this evening, we have the Montgomery Development Fund amendment. Director Young?
Thank you. This is the long-awaited amendment to the program that we've been working on for quite a while to put together in the Mill District an incentive program through the Montgomery Development Fund, where each individual restaurant establishment could make application for a grant to move forward with the establishment of new businesses within the Mill District. What you have in your packet includes an overview of the overall program and what the objective is of the program to help provide some additional traffic and customers in the downtown area so that we have a more active community in the form of entertainment venues and dining venues in the downtown. The overall incentive program outlines the requirements for application, which include the financial capabilities of an applicant to fulfill the scope of the project, the identification of the experience the individual applicant has had in operating or owning restaurants, all of the details that would be required in a business plan would be required as part of the application process. Identification that or the ability to identify that they have the financial wherewithal to make the project a reality, and indicating how many full-time jobs would be provided and what type of services in terms of hours of operation and the types of outdoor venues that could be potentially provided. Also included in your packet is a draft application form and then a grading form that would identify a worksheet, if you will, where the Montgomery Development Fund Committee could grade each individual application and how it would go about providing a recommendation on the amount of grant to be provided for each individual establishment. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about the format, and hopefully we can move forward with this in short order so that we know that we have two very interested parties in coming to different properties within the downtown. So we'd like to move forward with this as soon as possible.
I have a question. I would imagine there could potentially be some sort of situation where, let me back up and phrase it this way. I didn't see anything addressed in here in this application process in terms of guidelines of what the money can or cannot be spent on. And I'd like to know, is that addressed someplace else, or is that going to be up to the discretion of the committee member?
The application asked for what the intended use of the funds would be in terms of equipment or improvements to a site. The overall Montgomery Development Fund identifies uses that are not recommended in terms of an application, and we could include that more specifically in this portion of the overall program. This is the fourth component, if you will, to the overall Montgomery Development Fund. You'll recall that we have the low-interest loan fund, we have the $10,000 forgivable grant fund, a maximum of $10,000 per application. And then we've had, this spring and summer, we had the $5,000 program for the COVID-19 relief fund for individual businesses that has now closed out. But my point is that within the overall guidelines, it identifies uses that are not permitted to use funds in the overall program. We could more specifically identify those uses within this portion or this section of the program, and I think that would be a way to handle that.
I would agree, just so that any applicants are aware of those stipulations. I remembered that we had them with the other programs. I was just curious.
Yeah, we'll
Here, and I thought maybe I missed something.
We'll mirror those uses in this application process.
Thank you.
Is this something where we can do our tweaks to it relatively quickly and get it on the agenda for like the next meeting, or?
That would be the intent, yes, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? I know it doesn't state specifically, at least that I can see, a maximum amount.
It does state a maximum of $200,000 per application.
Okay. All right. If there are no other questions, I would entertain a motion to approve the amendment.
Actually, I have a question, two questions, well, question statement. On the grading sheet, the Excel sheet, where you would attempt to grade the applicants, I was struck there seems to be a little bit of subjectivity in some of the questions and grading. In the previous MDF applicants, has there been issues of that subjectivity in terms of, I think it was a 5-to-1 scale or 4-to-1 scale of number of employees, where 5 gets you the greatest number of points, but that's awfully subjective based on the type of business, size of business, isn't it? In addition, the marketing campaign, there's just some items in there that I would seem to think it would be very difficult to quantify in relation to the amount of grant that would be
It
available
is
for that
definitely
applicant.
subjective for sure. I mean, that's built into that overall worksheet. That's correct. With regards to the number of employees specifically, previously, when we had the revolving loan fund, that was a big component of the revolving loan fund. You were graded based on the number of full-time jobs. And that was a component based on the fact that it was essentially CDBG money that required that to be part of the overall application process. It's encouraged to obviously create jobs now in our new program, but it is not specifically listed as a gradable item, if you will. So you're correct, it was in there previously, but when the funds were released to the village, for whatever purposes we chose to, we de-emphasized the creation of jobs in that
Gotcha.
regard.
Thank you.
And then to clarify, Rich, because I called Rich earlier today and asked about who was doing this grading, because of that subjective nature of it, is who was doing that, and you concurred that it's going to be the MDF committee will go through
Loan
and do
committee
that.
will review and make a recommendation to the village board, just as they do in other grant or loan cases.
Yeah.
So it won't be subjective as in one person, it's going to be a committee of people.
No,
that will
this
do
will
the
not be
grading.
done administratively or by staff. The grading will take place based on the recommendation of the committee to this body.
And just so Director Young and I have had conversations about this concept in the past, and so he's not caught off guard or anything else. This is not an issue that I will support, and that it's just philosophy. I understand it. I understand the need to activate downtown, get things moving. How my financial philosophy would be that the village would not support private business at this dollar amount. I don't think it's a terrible thing for the village to attempt. I 100% hope I'm completely wrong, and that should this pass and then be implemented, I would 100% support any business that would locate downtown using the program. However, it's not something as a trustee I think I can support from my perspective, just so you're aware.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Teresa, Denny? Okay. Call the roll.
Trustee Guyer,
Yes.
Trustee Spurling,
Yes.
Trustee Lee,
Yes.
Trustee Youngerman,
Yes.
Trustee Marisak,
Yes.
and Trustee Betzinger.
No.
All right, that carries 5-1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. All right, we'll move on to item F this evening, the last item for separate action. Ordinance 1892, approving a redevelopment agreement by and between the Village of Montgomery, Illinois, and American Crystal Sugar Company. This is a waiver first and passage on the second reading. Director Van Voren?
Thank you, President Brawley.
Village Board approved Resolution 2020-11 at the May 26, 2020 board meeting to induce the redevelopment of the property located at 1601 Commerce Drive. This allowed eligible TIF expenditures to be made prior to the approval of a redevelopment agreement. The attached ordinance formalizes and approves that agreement to develop a second sugar dome and the remodeling of certain parts of its current facility. Permits for the first dome totaled $21.2 million, for which American Crystal did not ask for any incentives. The tax increment for the first dome and other improvements was over $600,000 for fiscal year 2021. This project will require an additional investment of not less than $20 million, from which the village will reimburse up to $2.5 million in expenditures. Representatives of American Crystal are in attendance on the Zoom call if they would like to make any comments, or either one of us could answer any questions the board may have at this time.
I have a question, if I may. When is it expected to begin breaking ground on the second sugar dome?
So the developer would submit for approval on or before December 31st, 2020. And they're looking to have substantial completion by March 31st of 2022. I don't know that there was a specific date agreed upon by which they would actually start.
That's okay, time frame works. The Tiff Funds, the $2.5 million, I'm assuming, just as always, they're, Tiff Funds can be used for X, Y, Z purposes. It will be used for those purposes. Our Tiff, that's TIF 2, correct? TIF 2 fund, how much is in our TIF 2 fund now?
Our TIF 2 fund, I will have to get back to you on that. I don't have the number in my head right now.
Ballpark. But if we're expected to give $2.5 million back, when are we expecting to start to give that money back? Is it at the end of the construction, or is it during the process?
So the first date they would be eligible to sorry, I'm trying to look it up really quick. The first date that they would be eligible to request a reimbursement, it would be paid out by December 31st of 2021. So it is not this fiscal year, it would be fiscal year 22. It is anticipated that would take roughly 5 years to pay that amount off, as long as the $2.5 million, they had $2.5 million of qualifying expenditures.
And I realize that most of the funds in the TIF 2 fund are because of the first sugar dome. I understand that. I have no problem with that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions of Justin? I do have a couple. So you may have said this in your opening, what do we expect the increment to be created by this second dome? I'm assuming it's more than the 2.5.
So the increment on the first dome is roughly $600,000 a year. That's at 100%. We would expect the second dome to be at or around that same dollar value.
And so does this redevelopment agreement, is it set up so that when they submit for a certain dollar amount, we are only giving them the amount of any increase that they've created? Or is it anything up to that 2.5 starting on day one?
So it would be any increment created that year. So in fiscal year 22,
like I said, this year for fiscal year '21, it was $600,000. The agreement states that we would be giving them whatever was created that year in increment. So if next year it's $610,000, that would be the max amount that they could get for that year.
I have another question, if I may. As we move forward in this process, I know last time there were questions and concerns with the fire department concerning any special apparatus that may be needed for fighting a fire at the Sugar Dome. I believe we handled all of those and solved all of those with the first dome, but if there's a second dome, do we need another foam trailer or something like that? Can we reach out to him, kind of find out what the requirements are?
We will reach out, certainly.
Thank you.
And maybe just more for the public, what are the TIF eligible expenses that would generally be covered by something like this?
TIF eligible expenses, planning, destruction of existing property, which they are going to have to do.
Demolition?
Demolition. There would be also some storm sewer work that would be eligible as well. I don't have the entire list with me, but those are several of the
And
items.
who makes that decision? You, when they submit the expenses?
We would look at it, I would look at it to determine if they're eligible. If there were any questions, we would talk to our TIF attorney.
Okay. And I know we have some folks here from the petitioner. I don't know if there's anything additional that you wish to add to the conversation?
On behalf of the company, my name is Claire Walter, and I just wanted to say thank you. I'm sorry, some of the questions I can't hear that well. I want to just say thank you for your willingness to partner with us.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Teresa, Denny, anything?
No questions. I'm glad they're here, that they chose Montgomery. We're very glad that you're here.
Yep. Yeah, I had the pleasure of being inside that other dome shortly before they closed it off, to clean it and seal it. And it's a pretty massive structure that more or less pops up overnight. So we're very excited. Obviously, it's been very helpful in starting our TIF off on the right foot. And certainly happy to have you guys continue your investment here in Montgomery. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, if there are no other questions, is there a motion to approve item F, ordinance 1892?
So moved.
So move.
Cool. There's been a motion and several seconds. Any
Is that
discussion?
you? Okay.
Was I too quick?
No, you're good. That was second by trustee Spurling.
Okay.
And if there's no other comments or questions, go ahead and call the roll.
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Betzinger?
Yes.
Trustee Guyer? Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
Trustee Lee?
Yep.
And Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Claire. All right, we'll move along to items for discussion this evening. Item A is our sustainability update from Senior Planner Chipman.
Thank you very much, President Brawley. So about a year ago, we started a sustainability initiatives update that staff was going to provide to the village board. We had several updates, and then the pandemic kind of took over, and we put a little bit of a halt on them. So I'm trying to get this back in front of you now. So first of all, I'd like to mention that the village has been designated as an EPA Green Power Partner. The village's electrical aggregation company, Eligible, Energy purchases renewable energy certificates for the entire community. This results in some 2,868,000 kilowatt hours annually of green power used by the village. Another item, giving you an update in regards to the electrical vehicle charging station that was installed in December of 2019. Since that time, just over 1 megawatt of electricity has been utilized to charge vehicles. This equates to avoiding 422 kilograms of greenhouse gas emissions, and that is similar to planting 11 trees and letting them grow for 10 years. The village has officially joined the Fox River Bike Share Program. The 4 bikes that you may have seen out front of the Village Hall and on our social media were commissioned on July 31st with a ribbon cutting on August 3rd. The village received funds from Kane County to initialize this program. This was something that we hadn't initially budgeted for because it all depended on how many communities joined the program, and that was quite variable. Well, due to the pandemic, a lot of communities decided to not move forward with their bike share operations this year. We're hoping that they get online in future years, but that also increased the amount of investment that Kane County provided to the village for that program. So it was almost a one-to-one investment on their part as well as on ours. The village has issued 56 solar permits so far in 2020. This equates to a total of 172 permits over the last 3 years. One of these permits is for the Fox Metro Water Reclamation District utility scale program that was approved back at the end of 2019, or excuse me, 2018 into 2019. This solar field is designed with more than 7,000 panels to be installed. With that, I'd ask if you have any questions.
Awesome.
Yeah, Jared, I got one real quick. Can you tell me cars have used the electric and how many bikes we rented?
So, excuse me, the cars, the breakdown gives.
They're still on, so keep going.
They are? Okay, great, because I may have kicked something. I hope not. There they are. Wonderful. Apologize. So cars, there are 5 unique cars that have parked at the station. So and that varies month to month, but there are 5 total unique cars. Some months it's only 2, but in general, we normally see 5 different vehicles there. In regards to the bike share, I was trying to look up this information, and I need to get better at utilizing the portal that they've provided. However, in the month of September, there was only 1 rented, but I do know that in August, there were quite a few more. We do have quite a few locations in Aurora, and Batavia is joined, and Elgin. So it is my hope that we get a little more interaction with people in the area and allow them to bike to places in, say, Aurora, et cetera.
No issues with the bike share, they were rented, but they were also returned?
To my knowledge, there has been no significant issues. We had a couple bumps in early August, but we've worked with the provider Colony to address those.
If I wanted, and I think we've asked this question before, but if I wanted to rent a bike in Montgomery and bike up to Elgin and leave it in Elgin, I could do that, correct?
Absolutely, as long as it's left in one of the designated locations.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You could start with a trip from here to Aurora.
It's a long walk
I
back
don't even
from
know if I'd
Elgin.
make it that far.
I might drive to Aurora and pick you up, but I'm not driving to Elgin to pick you up.
All right, Jared, thank you. Appreciate it.
Hi, wait, question. I couldn't hear what you guys were saying, but I did have a question for Jared.
Yes.
Jared, how much longer will the bikes be out? I did see them in front of Village Hall. So how much longer in terms, with the weather coming?
Yes, I do not have a solid date. However, typically they are scheduled for removal in November at some point in time. And then I believe they'll be brought back between April and May, depending on what kind of a spring we have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. We'll move on to our last item for discussion this evening is Public Works Space Needs Analysis. I believe Director Van Voren's going to summarize. And then I just want to confirm, Teresa and Denny, you can hear the presenter? So like when Justin speaks, you can hear him? Why don't you try that?
I can hear whoever is right in front of the village's computer.
Okay.
Me too.
Very good. Okay. Village Board authorized the Public Works Space Needs Analysis at the May 11th, 2020 board meeting. This is phase 1 in designing and building a new public works facility. There were several meetings that are detailed in the booklet in the packet. At this time, I am going to turn it over to Mark Bushhouse and Mark Rohde of Williams Architects to go through their presentation. Afterwards, Mark, myself, and the representatives from Williams will be able to answer any questions.
All right, thank you again. Mark Bushhouse, Architects, very glad to be here with you this evening, talk about a very important project that we've been studying with your staff the last several months, new public works facility. Next slide. So tonight we want to talk about the criteria behind the design. We'll talk about our space programming that came up with the sizes, some of the process we went through of touring other facilities, working with staff, and then developing various concepts and ideas, working closely with EEI, the village's civil engineer, and coming up with also building plans that could explain how the project could work, and of course, then with it, cost of these things to let you know what they might, what they will run you to build them. Next, please. So the criteria really is all about helping your staff have a very safe, very efficient facility that meets the needs for today and is planned well to allow growth or to have facilities there for the village to grow into in the future. We certainly started from the very beginning and looked at your village itself. You looked at your population growth from about 4,000 now. And again, 2035 is a 15-year window, then another 15-year up to 2050. At that point, those folks that are estimating population area for the Northeast Illinois are thinking Montgomery could begin to really flatten out at a top population of around 33,500. Your square miles have grown from 7.2 or so to maybe around 9.4, but ultimately could end up around 13.5 miles. And so, you know, just want you to know, we started with the very basic understandings of your village, its growth, its change that is coming up. We spent some real time working with your staff. Also, a member of our team, Ron Hilton, is a national planning expert for vehicles, equipment, staffing, and so forth for public works facilities. And through that process, we determined that your existing staff of 18 really is undersized and has not kept pace with the growth of the community. And of course, the square miles and miles of roadway and services that they are performing. That 18 staff really should be about 28 staff right now. And by 2035, if the growth of the village is on track for what's predicted, your staffing needs would likely grow to 40. And then as you're flattening out in the future at near a maximum growth of the village, you might need around 52 staff. So again, working that and also looking at national numbers here, we also then realize your vehicle counts are going to grow with that, because as you have crews of people, they need more vehicles, they need more equipment. Right now, you've got about 52 vehicles in total of various sizes and types. You really should have more like 67, and then that's going to grow to 85 plausibly, plus or minus 2035. And again, if you reach your top population and square miles and services by 2050, you could very well need around 100 vehicles in total. So those are very foundational things to say to help us plan for you a facility that certainly gives you the options to decide how big you want to build now, but we want to be absolutely certain that we lay this out and design the overall approach so that as the community grows at whatever pace it grows, ultimately you can fit the entire facility on your site, have it lay out and function, again, safely, efficiently, and effectively for the life of the building and for a very, very long time for the village. So with that, then we went through space programming and say, okay, with this kind of staff, the kind of crews they have, the shops, the services that they perform, all the vehicles they have, what kind of space do we need? And first of all, the vehicles, again, are driving most of the building size. So looking at that, we get into the vehicles themselves and we do the analysis of each vehicle and determine, is this a vehicle or a piece of equipment that could simply be parked outside? And that's the cheapest way to do it. If it can work that way, that's great. Is it something that could be housed in a seasonal building where you swap equipment and vehicles in and out winter to summer? Again, so that's a lower cost way to house things because you can double the capacity, as it were, because you're shifting summer to winter. And then there's vehicles and equipment that can't just sit outside. The UV, the ice, things like that really can cause problems with that. Also, there's a lot of PVC and other plastics-based piping now that should be stored out of the sun because the UV rays are very destructive to those kinds of pipes and materials. So now we also take into account covered areas, what can be parked there. And then finally on garages, what should really be in an enclosed garage area, what vehicles need to be in there, what kinds of equipment. These are things that need to be thawed out, ice-free, snow-free, out of the sun and above freezing so they will start and work well. And of course, these vehicles, we also look at trailers because crews will outfit them the day before. And sometimes they'll have paint or other fluids that they want to have on those trailers ready to go in the morning. And if we can keep those inside and above freezing, that just makes a real difference in their efficiencies to not have to unload and reload night to morning. So for the vehicles, we look at those kinds of categories. Then of course, the other spaces in the building, we have shops where crews are maintaining equipment, running projects, storing their tools, et cetera. So we have different shops that have different functions. Streets, we have underground, we have forestry, we have building maintenance. So again, those are all designed to house those crews, have an office, a computer work area, and of course the shop area itself. Above that, we have an administrative zone for higher level staff that's in supervisory roles. We need rooms to meet with staff. We need locker rooms, changing areas, showers, all those kinds of things. So we're also looking at the plausibility of having an exercise room and a large enough training room that could be a lunchroom or a place that they can allow all staff to gather for those periodic HR meetings and other kinds of informational events that happen at any organization. So with all of that, the high level here is if we want to provide a building that has the spaces as described, the right kind of spaces for the different vehicles and equipment types, and enough administrative and shop areas that really are the ultimate size for the future because they are more difficult to add on to efficiently later, we're looking at a base building of about 54,900 square feet. And then a possible addition that could happen in the future, 1 or 2 stages, however, or you could build it all now of another 19,000. That really is garage area and covered parking to allow all the vehicles and equipment to be properly stored as you would grow down the years and add more vehicles, more equipment. So that's the basics of how you can step into this and grow. We also did a back check on this and said, okay, We did our math, we did our analyses. Now, how do we compare to other communities? Right now, you have one staff person for every 1,024 citizens in Montgomery. And frankly, the other towns in the area that are reasonably comparable to you, their ratios are one staff person to every 550, 600, 650 citizens. So you certainly are running with a much lower level of staff per population, lower staff and equipment per miles of roadway than most of towns that would be considered your peers in terms of size and population and area. So the kind of staff numbers that we're quoting you of taking you from 18 right now to 28 to be the right size for what you should be is what it takes to get you, one, from everyone's analysis, what they need to get the job done, and two, puts you more in the ratio of what these other communities are already operating at. Then, of course, the dollars here, big deals. To do what we call this basic building that gets what you need now and covers everything you need to hire and get the equipment that you know you need to be the right size today, knowing it'll take you probably 5 or 10 years to bring all those people and get all that equipment on board and get to that 54,900 square foot size, puts you in a total cost range. This is turnkey. This is furniture, fees, building, tools, all that, at about 10.7 million to 14.6 million to get that one done. And then to add on the other 19,000 square feet, that adds about another 4.2 million if you wanted to do that now, so that the overall project would end up at 14.6 to about $18.8 million if you wanted to build the ultimate facility at this time and then just grow into it. Again, we'll talk more about your thoughts and questions, but if you were ready to move ahead with this project and could give the go at the end of October, we'd work through the various design phase of schematic design, design development, construction documents, get this out to bid in May of next year. Construction could plausibly start in July and take about a year to get done. So by plus or minus July of 2022, the building could be ready for your staff to move in and begin operating out of it. So that's kind of the highlights of all the weeks and months of work and research and tours that our team has done. And all of that, again, to give you the kind of vehicles and equipment you should have, a sustainable building, good access, good flexibility. And when it comes to cost estimating, we have our own data, but we also brought in 2 other construction managers that we know who also were willing to look over our shoulder, as it were, and do some costing work. And we know there are even more construction managers interested in either helping or, of course, getting hired to do the project. I probably blew the slide presentation, but let's take a look at the next slide. Yeah, this is a programming which we talked about, 54.9 to do it now in a phase, 19,000 to add. You'd end up at 73,100. Again, we toured multiple other facilities. We looked at Algonquin, keep going, Village of Carpentersville, and then one more, we looked at South Elgin. These were great tours. Each of these facilities had somewhat different approaches to layout and workflow, and it was very helpful to Mark Wolf and his team to look at these, and they were able to give us even better feedback of how they could envision how their department could run the most effectively and efficiently. So here we have a conceptual site plan. As you see here, the area up to the very top of the screen would be your existing public works. And that top edge of the parking lot, as you see there, would pretty much be the fence line between the existing public works and water department and the more open grassy areas to the south. So we have basically a loop of concrete around it to allow good flow. We got the big gray area, which is the ultimate build out garage. We build the right half of it first, if that's what you want to do, and then add the left half in the years to come as your fleet would grow. Then on the right, you see colored boxes. The upper right-hand corner is where fleet is maintained, vehicles are washed. Then we've got the blue, the sort of pink, the green, the yellow. Those are the shops for the various groups that handle buildings, forestry, streets, utilities. The turquoise area would be common areas that are supporting staff with locker rooms, lunchroom, workout room. And the red in the lower right-hand corner is the administrative zone of the building. Again, we've got it broken down between staff parking, visitor parking. We'll have fencing around this thing to control, and working with EEI on the next slide, if you have that. I think this is more of a blow up on the floor plan, but there's the garage. As you can see, it's rotated 90 degrees, but it was split in half. And then here's floor plan again, turn 90, a little more detail about how things could lay out. And let's go to the next slide. Here's the overall site plan. EEI had a clever idea of using the property across the creek to the east, to use that property to provide the stormwater detention basin. Very effective way to work off of the creek. Therefore, it maintains the largest buildable area adjacent to the Public Works building and achieves the stormwater detention that's required for the project. So as you can see, when it's done, we'll have a good access point off the road to the south, looping around the building, and still connect back into the existing Public Works building so they can go to the north and have access out there as well. And again, we're drawing the ultimate build out size. So we're showing and demonstrating that you can build the building you'll need to support the village of Montgomery over the very long term. Is that it for slides? I'm trying to, oh, then we got the cost. We give you a lot of breakdown between building, site work, soft cost, construction people involved. And again, we end up in that range of 10.7 million to 14.6 for the basic. Add another 4 to 4.2 million for the final phases. And if it was all built at this time, you'd end up with a 14.6 to 18.8 million to get that all done. Keep going. There might be one more.
That is all slides at this time. If there are any questions.
Okay, so we got through it. So thank you for attention, and with Mark Rohde, who's from our firm, has worked very hard on this, and of course, your staff as well. We're ready to answer any questions you might have.
Justin, can you go back a couple slides to this one?
Yes.
Plan.
Okay, so I'm trying to get my bearings here. So, which road is at the top? Where is Nell Road and where is Alcott?
Alcott Road would be at the bottom.
Okay.
And so the access, you see the access road in the middle, that would go over the Burlington Junction tracks right there. And then join onto Alcott.
Thank you.
I have a question, if I may.
You may.
What happens with the existing Public Works facility?
So the existing Public Works facility obviously needs to stay intact because of the fact that it houses our central lime softening plant. So what we're looking at is most likely the water staff that's there now will continue to work out of that facility. We'll be revamping that facility somewhat over time as we determine their needs. We're not anticipating anything drastic right out of the gate, but something that we're definitely going to evaluate moving forward. Keeping in mind as well the direction that the village is moving with our alternate water source and our decision there. So I want to be cognizant of the fact that we're not making rash decisions, putting large amounts of money into something that we either may or may not invest anything in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I guess, so what would happen if we changed our water supply? Let's say we bought water, finished water from somebody else, we wouldn't need that plant?
That's most likely correct. Yes, we would probably, and Engineer Wallers may be able to answer a little bit more direct on that, but most likely we would be decommissioning the lime softening plant as well as the possibility of the ion exchange plants at the two outskirts of the village as well.
I have a question. So you were talking about water would maintain in the existing facility, but we have a large square foot area here that's for water and sewer.
Correct. So one of the reasons behind that is we want to make sure that we can accommodate for what the future holds. And the reality of it is that if we go in with the assumption that our water plant is going to stay intact and we're going to stay, status quo on our, the way that we produce water, we're going to limit ourselves in the future. And one of the big things that we look at when we talk about costs in the new buildings, one of the big costs are areas such as this. So we believe by not accounting for it now, we're going to do ourselves a huge injustice in the future if we have to add those additional work areas. And when we look at parking, those are probably our cheaper things. But when we look at the office administrative area and the workstation areas, those are the most cost influenced when we look at a project like this. So again, without knowing a true direction that the village is going to go with our water source, it is a tough call, but we feel that we're being conservative in the fact that we don't, again, want to restrict ourselves when we do start to increase our staff levels and don't have, honestly, the ability to house the personnel and the equipment to do that.
If I could, Doug, on the same picture that's on the screen, actually looks purple over there, but
Yeah.
the blue area, it's roughly 2,300 square foot. That is the area that you're talking about for
Okay.
water and sewer.
I appreciate it. And then, so this, because this map that is on the screen now is the 73,000 square foot building, right?
Correct.
And from what he said, the left-hand bays, that's the 19,000 square feet that would come off
That is correct.
for $4 million. Okay.
And I know this kind of early, but would we likely design that, bid it out, and make a decision at a later time what to do with the future expansion? Or when do we make the decision to go or no go with that?
I think from the process of getting the drawings done and spending money efficiently, obviously make a decision now. That's very simple. We could also get through design, the next phase, which would be the first full phase of design. And we could design it showing it with or without. And at that point, we're hoping the village can have a construction manager on board and can price it more accurately, more definitively both ways. And that's a very simple thing to do at that point. And to us, for saving dollars for the village, that would be probably the best time for the village to make that decision. To do an alternates beyond that, now we have to do full engineering into the addition part. And there's really significant dollars into drawing all that up and designing it and engineering it. So if the village knows it can't afford that next piece, we would say, hey, please make the decision at the end of schematic design. And then if it's in or out, we just go from that point on and draw it that way.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on the report? Mark and Mark, I certainly appreciate this report here in the presentation tonight. It's a lot for us to have seen. It's the first time we're seeing this, but certainly do appreciate it. I know we're pretty excited about really completing the third, building that we need for operations here in Montgomery. We did the Village Hall and the police station a number of years ago, and kind of rounding this out with a life structure here, I think that would be good for our public works staff moving forward. That being said, we talked a lot about how much this type of a structure would cost. And the good thing is the land is free because we own it. But that $10 to $14 million, how do we pay for that?
We would pay for that by issuing debt. Issuing bonds, 20-year term bonds. We do have, I do have a couple of examples of debt service at $1 million a year. I also have debt service at $1.2 million a year, and how much that would equate to in new money. For the $1 million per year, that would be approximately $12.4 million. And for debt service of $1.2 million a year, that would be approximately $15.2 million.
And I know we can kind of probably at a future meeting go over, specifically how that shakes out, but we would be using, in our debt services, we use our utility taxes to pay for all of that, correct?
That is correct.
And we would have enough revenue over that term to float the payment on this.
Correct.
Okay. And I know one question that Denny is probably going to ask is where are we at with our current debt? So we issued debt for this building and the police department a number of years ago. Would also, I'm sure folks would like to know what the total cost of land in the buildings were, because over the years we hear varying numbers. But I think it would be good to put it in context as it relates to this presentation tonight.
Sure. So police station costs, we issued $9.4 million in debt originally. The remaining principal right now is $3,335,000. So $3.3 million out of 9.4. The building itself cost $9.8 million. So we did use some money on hand to pay for the police station. Village Hall, we issued $8 million of money originally. We also utilized $4 million of cash on hand, and we also utilized an advance from the general fund to the capital improvement fund. The total cost, Village Hall costs, and this is purchasing the properties that we had to clear to make the Village Hall, that is $13.8 million. Out of the original $8 million in debt that we issued, we have $2.1 million remaining.
Okay.
Quick, Justin. Does $1 million include like the water, putting the water somewhere else, the engineering, the electrical, changing the gas pumps? Does that include everything, or are you just talking building? I don't have the sheets in front of me.
For the Public Works, for the new Public Works building?
Yes.
Well, from Williams here, we believe it costs everything to improve the site and build this building. He's in it for the architects and our sub-consultants, furniture and equipment, some owner soft costs, other ones like testing, permitting, all that kind of stuff is all in those numbers. No, we don't have money in there for any work on the existing building, if that's what's being talked about.
Thanks, Mark.
I have a question related to the cost estimates for the new Public Works facility when it comes to material. When you were costing flooring, building facade, FF&E, mid-grade, middle of the road, what program was used to identify those cost ranges?
Can you repeat that for Mark and Mark?
Cost estimate?
No, Justin, because I'm sure, I don't think they could hear.
Okay.
The question was in regards to flooring.
Cost estimation.
Cost
What type
estimation.
of material for flooring, facade, just as that program was being developed? You've got cost estimates of $150 to $200 a square foot for kind of the large open space, and then $250 to $300 for the more office type type space is what's estimated. I'm just wondering what some of the assumptions for that was in terms of material.
Okay. Cost estimation for flooring, facade, some of the open spaces versus like the garage versus some of the office spaces. Where did you get, were those mid-grade level, were they?
I can answer that if you want, Justin or Mark.
Go ahead.
The reason there's a range in the cost estimate is just for that very reason, because there is kind of a range of finishes. So when we were doing our first go around with the estimates, we were looking at past projects that we had actually completed and took those dollars and escalated them forward for current today's prices. And again, there is a range. We also analyzed one of the existing buildings we went on a tour with, South Elgin, because that's a fairly new building. And that's, to be honest, on the lower end of the cost. And then we also looked at another project we had done, and that kind of puts you in the mid-range. And then as Mark mentioned earlier, after we did our estimates based on several different buildings, we've also shared this with a couple of construction managers to get their input on us. And they've reviewed it separately without us sharing the estimates, and they've come in kind of at the midpoint between our range. So if I think of our total project is 195 to 256, if I recall, they're feeling comfortable about $220, $225. So we've looked at it several ways, but again, to answer the original question, the range is for kind of a more simplified building at the low end to something a little nicer, little upgraded finishes, things like that. And as Mark mentioned, we will assume you will be bringing on a construction manager, obviously, and that will further help us define those costs.
Thank you.
I think the point of the estimating as well is we're imagining this building to have precast concrete wall panels around it. That is a very cost-effective material system. Frankly, you've got a fabricator that's partially in your own village, so that the trucking distances are extraordinarily nearby, which is wonderful. It's the kind of product you see in all the warehouses going out for these distribution centers. Of course, they're picking those products because they are durable, they are easy to and quick to erect, and they are very cost effective. I think our approach is to get you a building that's is a good, tough building that'll get the work. Probably has mid-range finishes inside in the office and other areas. Has a good level of gas. Certainly there are higher levels we can go. But again, the range is all about the unknowns at this time, the 1,000 decisions we have to make together. And the marketplace always gives us a bit of a gray picture on exactly what things cost today.
So I'm going to be the first one to say this. It's the sentence that we're supposed to say is, and that I think we truly believe here, is that we certainly are not intending to build the Cadillac of public works facilities here. We want a facility that meets our needs, but also is, I guess, representative of other structures in the area, but just of the community that we are, right? This is not going to be, and I shouldn't say this to our architects, an award-winning, Cadillac of public works facilities. This is going to be an extremely useful structure that I think we'll be proud of, but won't be on the upper end of that, that $14 million for sure. So I think it's going to be incumbent upon staff and a construction manager to keep beating down the price on that, absent of cutting us off at the knees, but making sure that we have what we need. But we are not going to be criticized by members of the public for purchasing a, X, dollar amount table or this and that, where it's fluff excess, that kind of thing. Maybe not being responsible with a considerable amount of money. Granted, this facility will last for 50 to 100 years, especially a precast, structure like that. But again, we need to be cognizant of that. And so figured I would just jump in and say that before anybody else here or Denny made that same comment.
One other question, and I'll stop. Mr. Bushhouse had mentioned some staffing to population ratios of comparable communities. what communities were you comparing the Village of Montgomery to with that, 1 to 1,000 versus the 1 to 600 ratio?
This is for Mark Bushhouse. You're on mute. Okay. You're on mute. You're on mute, Mark.
I hit,
Oh,
Justin, I just pulled up the spreadsheet.
all right.
okay, I have it. So, the communities that we're looking at are towns like Bensonville, Huntley, Algonquin, Danville, Elk Grove, Northbrook, Addison. Those are all communities that size and, there's a good number of comparisons. And again, their staff to residents is in that 500 to 650 range, something in that area. There are some towns that have more residents to staff, but those tend to be either communities that have just recently expanded and have a lot of very new infrastructure, or communities that are much larger and can handle efficiencies and possibly hire more services from outside vendors. We can get to the full chart if that helps.
One of my concerns with the facility in this conversation, and I mirror what you said, President Brawley, regarding, we're not going to build the Cadillac. We don't need the Cadillac, but we need a good functional facility. But one of my concerns is when we're talking about budgeting and numbers and things, is we're clearly also building the facility and allowing us to hire the staff that we need, because we are understaffed because of the size of the facility. I just want to make sure we keep that in perspective, that our budget dollars at the village level outside of building this facility are going to increase, because we're going to be hiring additional staff that will now have the facility to house. So I just want to make sure we keep that in perspective, that it's, all of a sudden 2 years from now, our costs go up on our staff and payroll because we built the new facility. We just need to keep that in mind.
I'm going to say that the words that come to mind for me are efficiency, functionality, and value. That's what I expect out of this public works facility. And I'll echo what the other board members and President Brawley have said. We're not going to build the Taj Mahal, but it's got to be functional, it's got to be efficient, and it's got to provide our taxpayers value.
Would, Director Wolf, I know we currently have fuel on site. Will that be being relocated? Is that going to stay in its current location?
So that'll stay in its current location. The idea is we want to continue to get the full lifespan out of those pieces of equipment, meaning the pumps and our tanks. One of the things that we're looking at, and I apologize, I don't remember the exact year, but I believe it's 2025. State of Illinois is going to issue new regulations for underground storage tanks. That would probably put us at a good place then to transition and relocate our fuel tanks. So that's what we're trying to do through this process as well, is identify a new place at our new facility for fueling. And probably what we would do is move it. We currently have an underground storage tank set up now, which requires the village to have a UST certified operator on site, as well as we hire a contracted service to do a lot of our inspections. But it takes away a lot of that risk and a lot of the changes in the qualifications that are going to come when the state makes those changes. Again, I think, if I recall correctly, it was 2025 or 2026. I can find that out. But so again, our equipment is in good standing condition, and that's one of the things too. When you look at this drawing, it's very well interconnected with the existing site. So one of the neat things about it is the police department staff, as well as public works and village hall employees that utilize that for fueling village vehicles, can basically access those fuel pumps from either location, from coming in off of Nell Road or Ockett. So we think that it's going to work pretty fluidly, and then again give us a good opportunity to transition in the future when those meet their life expectancy.
And the water filling station would also remain?
Correct.
where
That
it's
will
currently
remain
at?
there as well, which we think is a great place for that, given the amount of traffic on Nell. And then also, obviously, a lot of our operations moving away from the site will only help with issues with
Traffic.
people coming in for that bulk water filling in the future.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff or Williams Architect, gentlemen? Teresa, Denny, any questions?
Nope.
Okay. Can you guys go over basically the timeline from now moving forward? I assume any tweaks to this report will need to be updated, and will the board be taking action on this report at some point, or do we not need to?
So this report is the culmination of phase one. This is the space needs analysis. I would assume the board would accept it. If there, right. If there are changes or additional questions on it, we can certainly make those changes. Going forward from here would be phase two and phase three agreement with Williams or another architect. Also a construction manager. There are a number of different things that would need to take place in succession.
And one thing that we talked about before, and I just want you to retouch on, is why we're talking about this now. So, we had talked during budget time that we were planning for this facility, maybe starting this process a year-ish from now. And we cut about 12 months out of that, I think, at least. And I know there's a reason for that, and what is that?
So the reason for that is that we have an opportunity on the 2011 bonds to refund the 2011 bonds. We would issue both the refunding bonds and the new money together. And we would look at a savings of approximately $72,000 on refunding the 2011 bonds. So, by extending it, yes.
Sorry, and that's the, what is it, 5.4 million that we currently have out, the 2011, or how much is that?
So the 2011 bonds, we currently have outstanding. Hold on. We currently have outstanding $2,105,000. The 12/1 of 20 payment, we essentially have the funds to pay that now in this fiscal year. And then that would leave roughly $1.7 million that we would refund.
Be adding the 1.7 into whatever bond that we issue here for somewhere between 10 and 14 million. Something like that. And when would you envision that we would need to issue that?
We can issue that, really. We need to follow the state laws in regards to the new money, which there are certain requirements that we have to meet. Timelines that we need to, once the board approves issuing the bonds, then actually moving forward with that. There is a 30-day wait time on that. So it's at the board's pleasure as to when we would be issuing that debt.
But the main reason why we're considering any of this now is the low interest rates. would save us money potentially, or possibly between now and, so what you're saying is some point between the next 60 days, between then and right before we go to construction, we need to issue the debt. Somewhere in that window?
Yes.
Okay. All right, sorry, thanks for indulging in that. Any other questions?
One, and it just more for board, that the concept of build out full upfront, phase 2, phase 3, I think that's discussion. This group, is that cow meeting, is that next board meeting, is that discussion with staff? How do we want to handle some of those kind of philosophical decisions as we move forward before, I think like Mr. Bosha said, before we get into schematic and some of the more detailed of the project?
Yes, and I don't want to get into that tonight, only because I know that Teresa and Denny are having a hard time hearing us. So we'll fix that. But then I know we canceled the committee of the whole meeting for next week. I'm sure we could certainly uncancel that if you guys wanted to have that conversation, or we could put it on for the village board meeting in 2 weeks. What's the pleasure? Or I guess staff, what was your thought process when we would do that?
Really at your pleasure. We can do it at the 26th, bring that back and have that as an item we discuss.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, if there's anything that you need guidance from on us, let's do it at that meeting. And obviously a report as to why certain things are needed now, even though they might be a phase 2 or phase 3 issue. To Doug's point, I know that we're limited on our current facility and the size and the hires, but we're certainly not going to build a structure to then fill with people that aren't required or needed at this point, especially, well, at any rate, we can get into that, but let's plan on talking about that in 2 weeks. And will you summarize that for these two on the phone? Just that we're gonna talk in 2 weeks.
Sure. So for Teresa and Denny, basically, we are going to, staff is going to bring back what needs to be looked at moving forward into phase 2, phase 3, issuance of bonds, et cetera. We'd look at bringing that back to the next board meeting.
Nailed it. All right. Mark, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. Always glad to help out any way we can.
And
Hope
I
you
guess.
spend your money wisely.
Thank you. And just a point of clarification, do we have a contract approved for phase 2 and 3 with Williams, or we would need to bring that at that 27th meeting as well?
We do not have a contract approved with them.
Okay.
There is, the board would need to make a decision to move forward with Williams or with another architect. We can bring that back to the 26th board meeting to discuss. We do actually I do have a contract that is can be reviewed by legal if we do want to move forward with Williams.
Yeah, let's queue that up so that we can include that in our conversation. We certainly don't have to, take action on that, but at least the board can have that to consider at the next meeting. Any questions, Tom? All right, thanks, gentlemen, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, the last topic here, new or unfinished, anything from any member of staff or the board they wanted to mention? Let's not.
I have a couple of items.
Go ahead.
First, Director Wolf, DC Trash, just clarification. I know that in the beginning of the COVID, they were owned, I think in our contract, it's one large item per week. And some residents have asked me about that, said that they've put out large items, they haven't been collected. Are we still under that? where they restricted it where it wasn't one large item per week because of COVID, or we've gone back to what we had in our contract?
To my understanding, all of their COVID-related changes to the schedule are back to normal operations. If there are residents that are having issues with things not getting picked up, again, we encourage them to give us a call or reach out directly to DC Trash's helpline to give them that information so that we can find out why those items are being tagged and not collected.
Okay.
I had that issue actually 5-6 weeks ago, called DC. They recommended a call if you're placing a large item out, because it's a different route, it's a different truck.
Correct.
Okay.
And they immediately came back out the next morning and grabbed mine, but that was something I hadn't anticipated, but just
Okay.
maybe is in the next water
Yeah.
bill, hey, call in advance. It just makes it easier. I haven't had an issue since.
Another, I know, logistical thing that they try to do is obviously not put too much strain on one employee to sometimes load those items, so they do try to coordinate. I do know that is something that, kind of a flaw in the system, and in all honesty, I don't know if there's ever going to be a true remedy for that, but as Trustee Betzinger acknowledged and stated, if you can call ahead, that's a huge advantage to them, and plus it also ensures then that the item's not gonna be placed out there and sitting for some time.
I just did a couch last week, and I called, and she said, oh, we appreciate the call, but you didn't have to call, but we appreciate it. Mattresses are the one thing that's got a limitation. It needs to be in a bag. A mattress that you throw out needs to be, so large item, yes, mattress has to be in a bag.
My,
Apparently that bag, because I thought the same thing, President Brawley mentioned that it's a big bag. Apparently you can buy them at the hardware store, relatively inexpensively, but I thought the same thing. I don't exactly have one of those laying around.
my second question, an update as to the opening of McAllister's. I know that they had talked about potentially sometime in September, and I think they were waiting for a couple items.
I checked on that this morning. The back items have been delivered, as far as I know. So they're moving closer to a CO probably in the next couple weeks.
Okay.
They have some outdoor, some landscape items to complete. Some of the sidewalk still has to be put in. So there's some site improvements that still have to go in. But as far as I know, the things that they were waiting for to close out the inside, they're moving forward on that.
Okay. I asked because I work close to there, and I would be going there for lunch, so.
Understood.
Thank you, that's it.
All right, Denny, Teresa, do you have anything?
Nope.
Perfect. It's nice to see your ear. All right. If there's nothing else, our next village board meeting will be on Monday, October 26th at 7 PM in this room. Like I said, we'll get this audio kind of fixed up before then, so you guys have an easier time hearing all of our conversations. And with that, no executive session. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Betzinger.
Yep.
Trustee Guyer.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling. And Trustee Lee.
That's
Yes.
our first thumbs up there. All right, and we're adjourned. Thank you.